Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight we are going to be talking about our human existence, our soul, lineage, and story, the wetsuit that we are wearing, the vehicle in which we appear to others, our perception, our judgments, and the way in which we appear in the world. Are we basing all of our life about our gender, our race, our color, our creed, our faith, our age, or any of these other things that society seems to put upon us? And now we're coming about in the year 2023, and we're saying no more. No more judgment. No more casting out shame, guilt, past stories. No more casting out hatred, missteps, violence, abuse. And we are also truly saying, is there something more? How do we launch into forgiveness? How do we launch into a new way of being a human? And how do we begin to turn the tide in a society that at many times has gone awry? If we look back over the past several decades, there have been many times in which there were stories in the world that kind of had to stop for a minute, had to say, maybe this, maybe not that, and I'd like to change something. And there'd be a little bit of change, and then it would fall by the wayside. Now we are at a time in which humans and our soul essence are at a cataclysmic kind of time. It is a time in which we have no further choice. We cannot go backwards. We must make a choice to go forward, or else we can make the choice to be stuck, and that's okay. But just realize you're on the other side of the door now. Everyone is. We've had enough questions in society about who are we? What are we about? Why are we here? And why are all of these things happening in the world around us? Okay. My guest today is Ronnie Gladden. His book is White Girl Within, Letters of Self-Discovery Between a Transgender and Transracial Black Man and His Inner Female. Ronnie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us here.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here to talk today about this topic we say of gender, of race, of people, of humans, of the vehicle presentation, that's showing out in society. Because as we see, in the past several years, things have come up in, I guess I would say, in social media, on television, or even in personal lives that has really been shaking people to the core. Do you think?
Absolutely. I do. And I think that that's most likely a number of years of just layers with respect to images, and social media has compounded that, and it's giving a lot of pause. We're in the era of selfies and the era of TikToks, where you have instantaneous images, and the velocity of that is so powerful. But then we also have begun to question about how some aspects of our lives, particularly the wetsuit, as you mentioned, what that looks like, what that means in an era of face tuning and filtering things out. And some of that may add up to a point to where you start to question, what is real, what is authentic, what is it that I'm really seeking to portray. So I think that we are definitely at a kind of fulcrum point, and perhaps even a sort of precipice.
Yeah. What I really noticed too, Ronnie, over the decades is if you look back at the 1900s, that sounds like ancient time, but most of my life was spent in the 1900s. If we look at it, and, people were kind of normal in the 50s and 60s when I grew up. It was no big deal, you know. You were who you were, you know. People didn't judge that much then. But then we came upon the years of the 80s and the 90s when plastic surgery started to take hold, and people started to say, I want to look perfect. I need to look better. And that's really where society was going, because in the 1930s and 40s, people didn't have teeth. They looked pretty rugged. They looked pretty disheveled, you know. They had a lot of issues and things, and they died young. But then they wanted a White House, a picket fence, a degree. In the 70s, it was all about straight teeth. 80s and 90s was about, you know, plastic surgery. And we look in the years, you know, the 2000s, now it's all about stem cells. How can we alter our AI, so to speak? You know what I mean? How can we be that robot that is so accepted, that is so in perfect order as we've always wanted to believe? Do you think maybe we've set ourselves up to say, there's nowhere else to go. We have a choice. We're going to fall off the edge to find out who we are because we can't go any farther. Maybe?
I think that's a possibility. However, I think there's so much velocity, as I mentioned previously, around what's the next way to hack into our biology and into how we think and how we present, that before we get maybe to where you just mentioned, we'll want to stretch the possibilities more. The earlier part of the 1900s, those are times when my grandparents and my parents were coming of age, and I remember interacting with them, you know, because I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and they had a very different perception on things in terms of how to present and how I felt that I wanted to be, you know. So my father had Gunsmoke and John Wayne as quintessential types of masculinity, and then here it is, there's Prince and there's Michael Jackson for me in my youngest years, and as I moved into the teenage years, then there's gangsta rap, which was the exact opposite of what I had in childhood. And so there's been lots of notions of the archetype and playing on what that might mean. And now that we are moving to what could be Neuralink, you know, where we implant a chip in our brain and we have the internet in our brain, and we do things that there's a 45-year-old gentleman you may have heard recently spending $2 million a year working with a team of doctors to become 18 again. And he's getting some progress in that. He has the heart of a 37-year-old now as a part of his regimen. But I really think we're wanting to push the boundaries, you know, in terms of what we are and how we present. And I think we may get somewhere. We may help with certain ailments and keeping that at bay and optimizing. But similar to your point, I ultimately think there is a limit to all of this. We have some limitations with antibiotics you're hearing, at least at present. Certain strains and strands of illnesses and viruses that once reacted to the antibiotics, we're starting to have issues with that. There's limitations with rare minerals with respect to the earth and what have you. So we are probably at a fever pitch when it comes to hypercapitalism, when it comes to colonization and the sort. So we may have stretch some things, that there's so much that the human body can do, and we continue to push it. So it is a really interesting way to strike a balance between what can we continue to do in the name of progress, especially when it relates to identity and how we present, and then yet balancing that with the limitations so as we don't violate the very instrument that it is that we want to improve at the same time. So, yeah, I think there's very much a lot for us to process in the regard that you're discussing.
Right. Well, I think also, too, Ronnie, when you'd say self-discovery, you know, your book right on the cover, is it self-discovery of the human story, or is it self-discovery of the soul within? That's two different totally things. the difference is I think that we have identified with a human story, the human that we have jumped into, the ancestral lineage, that which we downloaded at birth, that Rolodex in our head, and we've kind of been so stuck in that, we can't diverge from that to say, let's find my soul. What is my soul and my spirit about? Because your soul and your spirit has eternal lifetimes. This is just a paradigm. This lifetime is just one chapter in the book. Each time you walk in and out, you're opening and closing chapters. So if we can see it that way, then self-discovery would be about you want to know about your soul and your spirit because it has so much more value to you versus how you're showing up in the world today for the one story of this lifetime. But the human in this story, in this one lifetime, does have a purpose because it helps you explore aspects of self, like knowing about what's good, what's bad, what's right or what's wrong, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, abuse, violence, all of these different things. So that's what you learn within that human construct. Perhaps?
I would agree with that. And I do think fundamentally that there is the element of the personal story that's inside of the title, the subtitle of my book, as well as with respect to what I'm going through personally and what I would suggest that we all are going through is working to figure out more of our own diversity. I love the quote from Henry David Thoreau, where he talked about, turning your mind's eye inward and exploring your own cosmography, that we have just as much of a interior universe inside of us, just like it is in outer space, in the galaxy. So all of us have those complexities. And now, as you said, there's so many distractions, it may be more difficult to begin to take that kind of a sentimental journey and personal journey. And I agree, too, still, that there's that element of the transpersonal that's inside of the subtitle as well, too, because we all, as I said, we're looking to self-discover more about that. And, and there is a human story that's a collective, and I like, the words of Chaminade Ngozi Adichie, which is, there also is the dangers of the single story. And the human story is collected, but it's made up of so many individual perspectives and a rich tapestry. And that gets, I think, muzzled a bit. And we have maybe less of access to the richness, up to the subtext and text and all of what connects us in terms of our collective story. So I think that's definitely the case. I like that you pointed that out.
Your book truly is about being a black male and having a white girl within. And what I had written on the front page was, one cannot shed the human identity until all the parts are known, all the beliefs and truths are examined, and the source of the soul is revealed. And when I picked up your book, Being a Medium, instantly when I set my hand on it, I said, his past life, his present life, and those essences are all coming together. Many times on this show before, I've had many guests who have been on, and they've had glimpses of their past lives. I have them all the time. I live in New Orleans. I can walk down this certain street. I can hear, and I physically feel I can hear the clops of the hoof of the horse behind me, and it's coming quicker and quicker, and all of a sudden I take off of a sprint to go to the lapidary that's down on the corner, the gem store, and I go running in there, and when I get inside, I'm hanging onto the counter, can't even breathe, and the lady says, honey, what's wrong with you? And I said, I just can't breathe. She says, oh, gems have that. But no, what played out in my mind was that I was a little black boy, and I know the year. It was 1873. I was running down that street. The cops are behind me. I had stolen a loaf of bread, and I ran into the lapidary because it was there then. So I think sometimes we pick up what in our past self, our soul story, might be eking through to want to have a voice in the present so that we can then look at and perhaps explore, that which needs to be validated, that which needs to be present, that which needs to be, hey, I can let go of that. I don't need to hold on to that. I can hold on to that. That's a piece of me. Hey, I needed this piece to my puzzle. Do you think perhaps there may be some shadows of that within your story?
I think there very well could be. I have sought out mental help in this area, as you could imagine, yes. And I've done that for some time. And one of the mental health professionals I met with about a year or two ago, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's Dr. Siri Satnam Singh is his name. And he is a gentleman with a lot of life experience. He once performed with the late, great Eartha Kitt. In his time, he was a dancer. He had a life of the arts and then transitioned into a different season and became a mental health professional and earned his credentials. And one of the things he told me in a session was that he sees an archetype in me, similar to what you were saying, an archetype that had some connection to I think either medieval times or just to some element of antiquity. And he saw like feminine presence, feminine connection, which I found to be interesting. I've had a reading before and someone had said that perhaps I was an older woman, white woman in the past. This also makes me think of Luke Ruhlman. One thing that's really uncanny, he's probably a teenager at this point or close to it. He is in a white male body. However, since he was 5, he had these very specific, he could recount very specific things that happened. And it just so happened that everything he liked in terms of music and in terms of just his day-to-day was in alignment with a black woman who died. She was in Chicago. She died in a fire. They did a documentary on this. And there was so much overlap and parallel that there's just simply no way he would have known that, especially as a 5-year-old, and it was spot on. And what is even more uncanny is that person at the time when I first heard about this lived within just maybe 5 to 10 minutes away from where I live. And I just found that to be really, I was floored when I learned that. So to your point, I think very much that there's something that's here, because the book, I think, is examining our conscious dialogue as well as our subconscious dialogue and the collective unconscious. And I feel like there's a smattering of all of that. They're all like colliding. And I think that there's some element of awareness that's happening. I don't know all of what it is. I just know that it's almost like I was guided, and what needed to be expressed and articulated has come through me as the vessel. Yet I've known this identity that I'm describing in the book and that I'm telling you about now to have been with me since childhood. But now as I'm getting older, it's like crying out, it's shouting out from within. So probably all of us, may have some kind of awakening in one way or the other, whatever that may look like. It may not be an inner white woman or an inner black boy or whatever it is, but there's something that may very well be the opposite of everything, to what you may present as, or at the very least, it's so palpable and strong that it needs to be expressed, and it's a part of the psyche, it's a part of the unconscious, the subconscious that probably is demanding some attention and time. So, I'm really at a loss for still why this is the way that it is with all the work I've done to attack my ignorance. But it's very much here, and I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk more about it.
Because I truly see it as all of this is just you collecting soul fragments. You're going back in, and these pieces are just coming to you. and you'll just start bringing them forth. And then eventually you'll know yourself as a soul versus all of the identities of those people. And, when we can see ourselves as this eternal soul, all of these things do come to us. I mean, I can remember so many lifetimes. In fact, the person that I'm with now, I was only with them for like 2 months, and someone had said something to me, and why don't you get married or whatever? And I said, because he doesn't have enough land. And it was like, what? What are you talking about? He doesn't have enough land. And what it was, and it instantly bonked in my head, this guy was my slave master. That's what he was. I live in New Orleans. He was my slave master. And has played out the entire time with the relationship with that person as being a slave master. And, when we can see these little windows or glimpses, I think those are the things that start to show up. We say, awesome. Write them down. What are they about? They're just fun to see it because it kind of then erases some of the tension out of your mind or your consciousness, because it's sort of like your consciousness has said, you've awakened that corner. I don't need to worry about stuffing something in there now. It's sort of like you become freer in yourself because you say, I don't need to hold on to that secret. I don't need to hold on to that story or that memory. I don't need to seek out that which might be broken or that I'm afraid or if I have shame or guilt around. And they start to ease out, after a while. And it's, I've been back living in New Orleans. I grew up in Pennsylvania, but, since I was 18, I'm here, and the place will not let me go. I left once, and it was like, and I came back, and the day I was driving in to move back, it was like I wailed for 2 years. And I'm going, this is really weird. What's the deal? And it was because it was something had attached to me, a spirit or an essence, or it was bringing up my time being here, and it just kept calling out to me. But I had to go through that phase. Just as you in your book, you have to go through that phase of, the white girl speaking to you and coming through, and their own emotions, their own feelings, and those things need to come through. And when they come through, all of a sudden, one day, it'll just go pop. Just like a soda can, it'll pop. And it'll be done. So I think it's very important. Your book is definitely very timely for many. White Girl Within is very timely for many people who are saying, I'm struggling with my identity. I don't know who I am. I don't know what's going on. However, they don't even realize that it is a spiritual soul path. It just has a different name. We look at people who are having suicide attempts. That's the same thing. It's just a different name. People who are struggling with a lot of health conditions. It's the same thing. It's just a different name. So we're all finding out the qualities and the quantities of what makes a human, but also how it guides our soul. And I think your entire book is what makes you human, but how does it guide your soul? That's the basis of your entire book.
Yeah, and I like that you touched on those sub-themes such as suicidality, because there is an element of that's in the book.
Right.
I would also add that there is bullying, there's domestic violence that's in the book. Unfortunately, there's lethal violence. I had a half-sister, unfortunately, that succumbed to an event that was very unfortunate. That was murder. And of course, there's LGBTQ+ that's there as well. And so there are those pragmatic structures that are very human, as you said, because I know we have spoken a lot about the metaphysical, and that's certainly, I believe, at some level that is probably very much what's happening here. But then in terms of the five senses, we have various things to navigate through, and perhaps there is perspective, because I did have a heavy-handed father, unfortunately, that of course obviously must have had his own trauma and things are,
right.
cyclical in that way for understanding. There's no excuse for his unsavory behavior, but nevertheless, he is human at the same time. So
just to interject right there, Ronnie, is that it's very important to note, too, is that I can tell you 99.9% of light workers, soul workers, mediums, psychics, those people who are already on the advanced soul path, have domestic abuse, violence, death, and those characteristics that you just spoke around. Myself, I have it in the very same thing in my lifetime, too. I can tell you, if you gathered a group of women or men who are very well advanced on the path, they will almost all tell you that they've had those experiences, because those experiences are what brings the light in. It's sort of like, I'm going to keep banging on the door until you wake up. They want you to wake up and be present, because only then can you know your strength. Do you see? So you might never know your strengths and be able to help others unless you've experienced some of it.
That does offer some perspective. Some of that has crossed my mind before. It's unfortunate that those themes exist in life, but it is the underbelly of humanity. It's unsavory, but it is at the same time, unfortunately, fundamentally, quintessentially human in a lot of ways, and we have to do better. And perhaps a part of having a broader consciousness, in terms of the soul's journey, as you're talking about, as I think that also comes up in the book, is if there is more of that light, that awakening that happens in more of us, and ultimately all of us, then we may be liberated then from those kinds of unsavory things, and you're able to function in a totally different way, have a totally different state of being in that respect. But that was quite, as you could imagine, challenging to go through those things, and it's weird now because of the legacy. I told you, an older father. He'll be 74 years of age later on this year, and so what is very much a part of his legacy is more and more increasingly at the forefront as he gets on in years. And there's so much still that's unresolved from what he did. And again, perhaps to your point, some of that may very well intertwine with a part of my identity, that exists in terms of seeking some reconciliation there. There's also, though, a fundamental part of me, too, that wonders just from the psychological standpoint, in terms of the social cues and the wiring of the brain, and just kind of having all of that come together, the aesthetic of the white female archetype and why that resonates so much. And from such an early age, like I said, from the age of 4 all the way to where I am today, just from a psychological standpoint, a part of me has to wonder if it's even more than just something that's fleeting, and it is very much a part of my interiority and an essence that's with me in this journey, and that does cry out for expression, because I am moving towards that. And I wanted to put that out there, too, for anyone that may have an alternative view, and to say that maybe beyond the metaphysical, in terms of just their own psychology, that this is a state of being. And I believe this is a state of being for me. So for others that think like that, too, I hear you. But I do think that there is a component that complements this, that there is that metaphysical component that complements the psychological. So I think this is definitely here with me for life. And I'm sure that other people, too, as they work to understand more about their interiority, their psyche, their soul, their consciousness, what's in there, those fragments, that's a part of your state of being, and it's going to be with you.
Well, I think also, too, what you said about your father's legacy and stuff and about, forgiveness and working through that and all. I know for myself, I have totally worked through that this lifetime. And I only see these people as, I see them as unconditional love and as a soul. I don't see anything else because I chose to be able to work through that whatever I have or what I had or whatever doesn't depend upon anyone else. It's just an experience that I saw, I observed, and I'm letting go of the tether lines. So I did a lot of cord cutting. I did a lot of energy work. I did a ton of releasing and purging and letting a lot of that stuff go. But I think sometimes, just as you share in your book, you said about how much are you going to carry the burden for both of us, how much burdens are you going to carry? And the answer is,
right,
is if you can take it and let it go and not expect forgiveness, because forgiveness is judgment. So then you're still locked in that old 3D kind of thinking again. If you can just accept and say, awesome. If you have a person that did domestic abuse, right, your father, say, awesome. Thank you so much for being and walking along the journey with me. I hear the lesson. I feel it. I sensed it. And now we are complete. That's it. Because then you honor that moment in time. You thank it for showing up because it showed up to teach you something or to take you through something or to get you even where you are today. And, even if it was just to say, hey, I'm going to question things in life, that's good enough. That's a huge lesson, or life shouldn't be this way. Great, you taught me a fantastic lesson. Life shouldn't be this way. And to go out and to seek a different way, But I think once you do that and you stop the judgment of good, bad, left, right, black, white, female, male, all that other stuff, when you do get to that point where all of that is extinguished and you transfigure yourself, not transform, transfigure. Transfigure means to step above that lateral line, then that's when you just say, all is complete. And I think you're getting there because I think this book is an exquisite dance to be able to get there of how you have enmeshed in the web of your life. And I think your next step will be that where you will eventually get there. And then you'll realize, then you are free. That's the freedom you're seeking. Because as you said in the book, to be free. And free of what? And it's not to be free to be white or black or male or female. It's free of all. You see?
Yeah. And to your point about questioning and or being initiated into having maybe a clearer sense of what not to do and how not to live versus how to live and what to do. Yeah, that's a point that I've spoken to in the book. Again, and both of us obviously don't advocate for domestic violence.
Right.
I disavow that, man's inhumanity to man, nonetheless, if it does happen and ultimately you will need to triumph and to get through it. And if there is any sort of takeaway, any sort of silver lining, if that's possible in that, there is, I think, a clearer sense of reward and unreward, the clearer sense of, again, what's optimal, what's not optimal. I do think that I've grown into that understanding, and I think a lot of us ultimately do that too. That's effectively like a moral compass, and what does that look like? And we have our moral dilemmas of varying types, and for better and for worse, at some point we'll arrive to a place, at least a season, in our lives when that will help us to determine, what is the right kind of life and what is not the right kind of life. And there are different things that will happen to help us to critique that. And in terms of freedom, absolutely. Yeah, there is that in terms of the soul. Yeah, for the soul to come out and to be the soul that it is. And we probably don't have a real way of conceptualizing that or working with that as long as we are embodied in in this corporal suit. But that would be the ultimate goal of what that looks like. But while I am in this wetsuit, and probably for others, we still have an internal standard, I think, in terms of what helps us to navigate through the societal matrix, through all of the ways that you have to get through. And for me, I know that is going to involve more of an integration, I think, of what's internal. So what otherwise has been repressed, suppressed, oppressed will get to come out so that it's expressed and not repressed in the way that it was, and make a synthesis. And I have to figure out what that looks like. And all of us, what we're doing that, even if it's more pragmatic and it's just a few less pounds, a little bit less cheesecake, a little bit more kettleball, a little bit more pickleball, whatever that might end up being. I love that you touched on that.
Well, I think that we get so stuck in this idea that humans are all on this trajectory that goes upward. Success, age, money, human, body, everything is up. Smart, time, blah, blah, blah. And if we could truly be able to see that life is a web, it is a tapestry, we wouldn't be trying to be able to push the others for getting ahead of you, or be able to, try to run ahead so that you could be first in line. Because if you have a tapestry, if you look at some of these Indian tapestries, like from Arizona, they're made of many colors, many different pieces and fragments. I have one hanging in my window because it keeps out the light at night. And on the bottom, I had cut it across, and I never bound anything because I don't bind things. And I just cut it across, and eventually all the threads started falling down. You know what I mean? Like it has long threads on it. And I said, the tapestry of life is unraveling. So the tapestry of life as I knew it is unraveling. I now have these threads that I can now start and take a new tapestry and create something different. So I think sometimes if we see it as a web of life, you may have something really good today and you work through it, fantastic. Next week it'll be like, well, holy heck, do I need to go to confession because I just did something that was really wrong and I thought I had this nailed, and it's not that way. And I've said this probably, decades ago. I said I really believe life is like an amoeba. I think of myself as an amoeba. Have you ever seen one or known of that in biology class?
I remember that.
Yes. And an amoeba has no really direction. It kind of meanders. It doesn't have any push or pull. Nothing draws it out or makes it go a certain way. Versus the octopus, stretch it out, pull it back, hold it on, tether lines. You know what I mean? It uses it for its own consumption. But an amoeba doesn't. So if you think of yourself as an amoeba in life, you're going out and you're checking into stories about your life. White girl, black man, pink suit, blue shoes, violence, danger, whatever it might be. Those are all of the things that the amoeba encounters along its journey. But it doesn't take them in and consume them as like the octopus would. It just says, I see you. Let's dance for a little while. Then it moves on. So,
and as you said, the web, I thought of like the mosaic as well, too. Yeah, I see where like the collage or mosaic rather than, as you said, everything doesn't have to be limited. I mean, there's linear thinking or linear developments are certainly valid and has its own place. And I think a lot of people understand that. For sure, and again, it has its own place, but there are a lot of things that just simply do not progress in that kind of trajectory, and more often than not, people, that try to start a business, that have a goal to travel, that have a goal to serve other people, that, have a goal to transform themselves, transform others. Oftentimes, especially when they're wanting to make significant impact, they'll find that the path was not straight, is not straight. It is very much, asynchronous. It's, again, the mosaic, it's the web, it's the collage, and that can be difficult to do, because there's a lot less that's predictable and maybe stable in that way, whereas, the more linear trajectory might maybe give the appearance that it's more manageable. So I see that in the development of the truth of my aesthetic, my interiority, and I'm sure a lot of people relate to that. So I like that connection with the web, and I'll add the mosaic in there as well.
Well, Ronnie, in closing, let's talk about this one topic too. What, even, like when people go out and they want to do a business for this, that, or the other reason, if you really drill it back farther, people are asking, I want to be seen, loved, and heard. And if you drill it back even further, they just want to be, it's almost like an ohm kind of something. You just want to be. You don't want anything else around you. And that's what it's all about. So in essence, I think your book is about saying, I wrote on the front of the page, this is not a break from reality, but rather a seeking of a soul journey. Because what you're looking at is that you're going through all of these things, and it's so, you're feeling them from the outside. But just as the white girl is saying, the screaming, she's asking you for something else. I need to know the deeper quest. What is the deeper story? You're not going there. Yeah. You're still dancing on the outside. I can distinctly remember when I was downtown at the French Quarter. New Orleans is very much a freeing town. You could see anything, anywhere, at any time. And it's very much different than even New York or San Francisco would be. It's definitely different. Well, at any rate, there were two men, and they had business suits on, and they were standing on the side of the sidewalk, and they had a glass in their hand. They were each having a drink, which you can drink on the streets here. And there was this girl, and she had a ring of flowers around her head, and she had like a Mardi Gras costume on, and she was kind of circling around them and just kind of dancing. And I'm going, isn't that awesome? I'm home, I'm good. And in essence, what it was is they didn't even pay much attention to her, but she just existed, So in other words, all of these things can exist in our world, but what do we really want? I think your quest is you just want to feel the love, but you don't know what the love is, because we're still looking at love is acceptance. Love is, do you see me? Love is, will you be nice to me? Will you do this, that, and the other? Where in essence, your soul is saying, no, we're going to find unconditional love, but we're going to keep going, and we're going to burn all those things out, and when you're done, you let me know. Sort of like God sitting on the side. I almost see God sitting with his legs crossed and flicking his foot. You know what I mean? Like, alrighty, I'm waiting. Let me know when you get here. So, but in essence, I think it's the quest of the unconditional love, because once you get to unconditional love, what are you doing but you're channeling him or the source or the cosmic energy, whatever you believe is the reason that gives you breath. When you get there, that's when you get your whole world just is a total transcendent kind of place to be. But I think that you are definitely showing by writing your book, showing everyone all of the dances that you've done, how you've explored, and how they can be free to do them also. That's the goal, for others to say, it's not so bad. I've done it before. Let me tell you about it. Just as you and I have shared today. We've done it. We're still here. We're okay. It didn't take us out. The words, the energy out there didn't take us out. We're still here. So we are all strong people. And isn't that what you want people to know?
Absolutely. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I think in essence what you really are trying to say is that I can love everyone unconditionally, And when you can feel that fully, it won't have a need to have anyone else love you or anything, because you'll be in love with yourself. So when we can come to that point, I think that's when the world will really start to shake, because there'll be more of us. Right now there's some of us, there's just not enough of us. So by being on my show today, by writing your book, we are now just exponentially, people are listening to be able to share the message. Is that your goal of writing the book?
I think so. I also find it, again, uncanny that by the time that most people start to hear this, we will have some significant planetary shifts as well. Right. And I talk about astrology a little bit in the book, and if nothing else, just appreciating the symbolism that's there. You know, Pluto itself, you know, as maybe not officially a planet, but astrologically a planet, is symbolic for going to the depths and, you know, plumbing the soul and things along those lines.
Right.
And I think that this subject matter is certainly doing that. And with Pluto set to enter into Aquarius, you know, symbolically this symbol of humanity, the sign of humanity, that you may likely have much more consciousness, as we were alluding to, happening, and people maybe confronting themselves, having maybe a collective dark night of the soul, and working with more internal archetypes, and in so doing, there may be others that can be led to some of what we're talking about. So it will be interesting to see how people can work to transfigure, as you were describing, you know, maybe advancing that journey or starting that journey or rededicating themselves to that journey and seeing more of what comes of that. And just practically, as we talk more about meta and more about avatars and increasing our presence online, some of those elements, identitarian elements, will come up, and the way that people want to be seen and how they want to interact in a digital, you know, environment. That should be interesting. So, I'm hoping that people can find value in this book based on wherever they are on their journey.
You know, I had written this the other day, Ronnie. I wrote it on February 5th. So we're going to close with this. I wrote, when you share a glorious story and it falls flat with the other person in listening or engaging in conversation, just say, they must have grown up on another planet, and leave it at that. There are those who have danced in the ethers, just as you, so keep sharing and delighting in observing the roles people play. It is a novel on the paranormal station, and it is there for you to read today. Be the page turner. See, observe, document, report, let everything feel its power in the universe today. And that's exactly, concisely what we were talking about.
Incredible. Timely.
Yes. So if you can see that as yourself every day, I think you step into that. That's just an awesome place to be, and that is our journey. So I thank you so much for writing this book, because I think that just as we share in different ways, different people hear different things, and that's exactly what was needed, yes?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, much to reflect on.
Yeah. Well, Ronnie, can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
Absolutely. So you can check me out at ronniegladden.com. So I love to help in diversity leadership space, and I see that being very relevant to what we talked about and to what the book contends with. Would love to go to your school and speak and the sort like that, and other places. Also, you can check out whitegirlwithin.com to learn more about the book and grab yourself a copy. And also, I am on TikTok, and you can find me at Twitter, and you can find me at Instagram at Dr. Ronnie Speaks.
Very good. Well, Ronnie, thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to have you with us. As we say, to dance in the ethers. We thank you so much.
Keep on dancing. I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like more information about Ronnie Gladden, again, the book is White Girl Within, Letters of Self-Discovery Between a Transgender and Transracial Black Man and His Inner Female, please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to his website for more information. And it is about saying, you know what, I'm just going to stand up, put my face to the sun, and breathe in today. Everything else, as I say, is lagniappe. It's all about a gift of life. So thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr.jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.